giant round of applause for all of our students and all of our You guys are all amazing, and now we're going to move from our design team pitches and maybe the next set of ideas. I'd like to invite John Kotek from the Department of Energy to the stage, and he's going to tell us a little bit about why all of this matters. So, John is the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of Nuclear Energy in the Department of Energy. The office is responsible for conducting research on current and future nuclear energy systems and in maintaining the government's nuclear energy research infrastructure. Prior to his role here, he served as the staff director to the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. And he has worked at Idaho and Argonne and maybe some other national labs? Just the two. Okay.
That's enough.
So please welcome John Kotek.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Really excited about this event. Congratulations again to Dr. Slabaugh for pulling this off. I know it's a heavy lift, and I'm glad to see the first one under your belt because we know there's going to be more. I should mention while I'm on the subject of Dr. Slabaugh, I do not now and never will have tenure, so I can do all of this sort of stuff I want. I would also want to thank the sponsors and the organizers for contributing to help make this happen, because obviously there are bills to be paid, and I know that's important as well. I know we played a small role in that, and I'm happy to have been able to do it. I'm going to keep this brief because I want to leave time for Q&A, but wanted to as was mentioned, just sort of put this in context. We from the Department of Energy, we're in the business of innovating in the energy space and providing for a whole host of low carbon, zero carbon options for meeting energy supply going forward. You all know that we've got commitments that we, the United States, have signed up to along with nearly 200 other countries as part of the COP21 agreements. We, in particular, have agreed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 26 to 28% from 2005 levels by the year 2025. That's a big lift. To hear Secretary Moniz talk about it, he believes that means certainly over the longer term we're going to need to essentially decarbonize the electric sector. And if you do the arithmetic, you see that it's really hard to get there without a big component of nuclear energy. And that's not just in the US, but also abroad. And so what we've been trying to do in my organization in the Department of Energy is call attention to the important role that nuclear plays, and then build pathways to do three things. First is to keep today's nuclear plants up and running. Allusion was made earlier to Diablo Canyon. As you probably know, there are half a dozen or more, maybe a dozen plants that are at risk of shutting down over the coming years. That's going to add, more likely than not, a big chunk of carbon emissions, right? Because while we know that some of that generation will get replaced by renewables, what's been happening, at least over the last several years as other plants have shut down, is they get replaced primarily by natural gas. Okay, there are a lot of forces at play. Economic forces and low-cost natural gas is I think chief among those that are causing today's nuclear power plant operators to take a look at the economics of the plants they're running and say, does it really make sense for us to continue running these plants at least under the current set of market conditions that they have to operate those plants within. So you may have seen we did an event up in Capitol Hill back in May to try and draw some attention to this issue. I'm pleased to say that according to my digital media guru, Susie Baker, her thumbs were going as fast as they could go during that event, and I think she said it became a top 10 trending topic on Twitter, and that's really hard to say. Top 5, okay? So it really all started there and then just sort of blew up. So thanks for that. I think what's happened is people are now starting to understand that if you lose these nuclear plants, you lose a very large source of essentially zero carbon electricity. You also lose a lot of jobs, you lose a lot of grid reliability, you lose fuel supply diversity. So energy system operators and state officials are starting to take notice, and of course we saw what happened in New York here. in the last week. From what we're hearing, there are other states taking a serious look at what New York has done and trying to figure out should they go down that road as well and do something to incentivize the continued operation of their nuclear plants in the same way they incentivize other types of technologies for the attributes that they bring. As we look out over the longer term, though, I mean, we want to have multiple potential pathways for nuclear deployment. Of course, we've got things like the Generation 3 Plus technologies like the AP1000, the ESBWR, that are available, that we in the Department of Energy helped co-fund, design work, licensing work on those plants, and we're seeing some get built in the US, we're seeing some get built abroad. We in DOE issued loan guarantees, for example, to help get the plants in Georgia built. So we're continuing to work to see if there are opportunities for more deployment of those reactors. We're also working on with a couple of different companies on the development and potential deployment of small modular reactors, and looking at those as potentially a nuclear generation option for either places in the U.S. or for potential customers overseas that maybe don't need 2,000 plus megawatts of new capacity that would come from a 2-unit AP1000 plant, for example, but they're looking for something that has lower capital costs and can provide them a smaller increment of new generation. So we continue to focus on that, and based on the schedules we've seen, we think in the early 2020s you can have a design through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and available for order here in the U.S. or abroad. So that's an exciting option beyond what we've got today. And then, of course, the advanced reactors, in big part of the conversation you all have been having. And of course, we're looking at advanced reactors not just for electricity production, but looking, as you heard earlier, to penetrate new markets. And do I keep hitting that? Oh, there we go. Okay, and so as you heard earlier, nuclear for process heat or hydrogen production or desalination, right? Renewable fuels production. There are a whole range of technologies or a whole range of energy markets that you may be able to bring nuclear to that nuclear doesn't currently serve in any large way, and potentially expand the benefits that nuclear brings to the energy system in the U.S. and worldwide. So one of the things that I've seen in DC, and I started in the Energy Department in 1989 and have been in and out of DOE a couple of times. What you probably caught from the intro is I can't hold a job for very long. And so this is actually my third time in DOE. But from the time I started to where we are now, I've never seen this much energy and enthusiasm around the subject of advanced nuclear. And you point to a whole host of examples to provide evidence for that, not the least of which is, in the Senate they had a pro-nuclear, advanced nuclear amendment get attached to the energy bill by an 87-4 vote, right? I mean, that's just historically, we haven't seen that sort of thing. Well, why is that? Well, sort of on one side of the aisle, there's been a lot of historical support for nuclear, both for power generation, but also for the export opportunities that it brings. Maybe on the other side of the aisle, what we're now starting to see is you've got people who take climate really seriously outside of government, whether it's NGOs, right, or investors who have looked at the climate situation and said, we think Secretary Moniz is right. We think we need a significant contribution from nuclear. And it's, folks you've all heard of. It's, people who made their money from working at Google or Apple or Microsoft or whatever. I mean, these are folks who know how to innovate, are viewed as very serious thinkers in technology space generally, and they're starting to invest in advanced nuclear, and that's getting people's attention, right? Events like this are getting people's attention. And so we've seen the conversation change in a way, like I said, that really has the stars aligned in a way that I've never seen in my 25 plus years of working in this space. And now, of course, there are challenges we have. As you heard, none of this is easy. The regulatory process can be long and complicated. The amount of money it takes to get a technology through the design, licensing process and into the marketplace, that can be a very heavy financial and technical lift. But what we're seeing with companies like TerraPower, for example, is you're willing to stick with it and make the investment over time, right? They're starting to get there, right? You've got NuScale on the SMR program. They've been making investments since NuScale was just a very small project under. Anyone here remember the NERI program? Yeah, all right, we got a few folks in the room. We had something called the Nuclear Energy Research Initiative that we started back in either 1999 or 2000 that made very small grants to folks not unlike yourselves and university faculty and national lab folks and others to invest in promising new technologies. One of them was a small project between Oregon, I think it was Oregon State University and the Idaho National Lab that is now NuScale. Right? I mean, these things can happen. Now, not every project, certainly, that we invested in under NERI got to that point, but there's one. So why can't that be one of you folks? Right? So I'm really excited to be here to encourage you all down the road that you're on now. I think, like I said, the enthusiasm, the interest is as high as I've ever seen it in advanced nuclear. The opportunity here obviously is huge for us, for the planet, for businesses, and we need our best people and their best ideas being put towards this challenge. And I think this event is a tremendous start. And I'll leave it at that because I can't wait to hear your questions. So thank you.